Okay, welcome. Welcome to your first session on your first day. You made it. We are so happy that you came to join us to talk about cross collaborations, approaches to ending youth homelessness. We have an action-packed session. I don't know if you heard or read in your program that they were looking to do things a little bit different this year. So we created a panel that was going to do things a little bit different, and then we were given the old style, same type of room. So we will be moving around the room. We're asking you to maybe move around the room. We're going to do some more, not just talking at you, but some more interaction. We're each going to do about 10 to 15 minutes, talk about how we came together and the work that we're doing. And then we're going to do a little more in-depth Q&A. So you can take away some action items for yourself or anything that you've come. So as we speak, think about, I need to ask about that because we're definitely going to have time to do those sorts of things. And Monique, maybe just talk about and we also have a fun activity to, like I said, keep you moving.
Mino Gajeb, good morning, everyone. So it was pretty perfect this morning. One of our speakers talked about the heart, the O Day, and so we have we know all of us doing this work. It's heart-centered work, right? We do it because it's our passion. It's in our heart. It's our our heart that we have for our community. We also have so many Indigenous teachings on heartfelt relationships and reciprocity. And so we thought we'd offer today an opportunity for you during the session to come up. We have some materials, ribbon, paper, pens, all sorts of things. We'd like to invite you, if there's something that resonates with you, if something you want to share, any kind of, anything you want to do to create that reciprocity, because we are in relationship together. It's so important that we are going to learn from you just as much as you're going to hear about the work that we do. And so feel free to come up and do that. And then once you do that, we're going to hang it on our heart-shaped dream catcher here. And it'll be a representation of our time together and hopefully some hopes and dreams for our youth and their future. Miigwech.
Thank you, Monique. And we just also look at it as a way to place something in memory with you instead of, again, us just talking at you. So thank you for being receptive to that. And of course, I want to respectfully and take a moment to recognize that we're on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And I hope that you have time to be outside and find peace on this land and also ask yourself some hard questions while we're here over the next 3 days. I also want to give a big thank you to Home Depot Canada Foundation for their sponsorship and commitment to preventing and ending youth homelessness in Canada. And as I said, we're going to introduce ourselves as we each take the mic. My name is Tanya McHaggerty. I use she, her pronouns, and I have the honor of working with Away Home Canada. And we're going to dive right in. And the slide's not showing. Oh, there we go. So what is Reconnect? Reconnect is a community-based early intervention program model that is designed to help young people who are at risk of the early stages of homelessness. It's largely based on the Australian Reconnect model that was developed in 2013. Youth Reconnect is a school-based intervention, and youth that are attached to Reconnect are most likely still attached to their family home. They have low engagement in school and struggle with academics. They have little or no experience to being connected to homelessness services, but most likely have done some couch surfing, and they still have a thread to a caring adult. As we know, data shows us and research tells us the earlier we intervene, the less likely that youth and their families will need more intensive supports later on. We believe this is where and how we end youth homelessness. At Away Home Canada, we took 2013 and a bit of the beginning of 2014 to learn from others that were already working in this reconnect space, meaning they have strong, sustainable prevention services with a strong connection to school partners and their community partners. Our friends, all gathered here, we worked with NYAWEH out of Hamilton and Trellis Society out of Calgary and Choices for Youth in St. John's, who actually wasn't able to join us today. And the goal with working with these partners was to dive a little deeper into their interventions and build out our key features of the Reconnect model, which I'll share along with you. With my colleague Heidi, with a little bit, she's going to talk a little more about the F&S approach that is embedded throughout all our work. And then our partners will share, a little bit about their programming. Reconnect is built upon 3 Away Home Canada and COH youth homeless preventions, our newest being Foundations 101, Housing First for Youth, and Family and Natural Supports. If you are looking to shift from intervention to prevention services, this is where I suggest you begin. Heidi or myself can talk deeper into any 3 of these models. And of course, this information is all on our website. And now I'm going to kick it over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Heidi Walter. My pronouns are she and her, and I also work for Away Home Canada, and I have the opportunity to work with so many of you in this room, which I'm so excited to see all of your faces today. So I'm a part of the training and technical assistance team, so that means that I get to travel around and spend time with all of you folks. As Tanya shared, I have spent the 24 years of my career working within the Housing First for Youth models, supporting young people and their families, and well as the Family Natural Supports model. And I'm super excited that you all showed up today because you are going to find out 2 new big pieces of information. The first one in front of you is Dr. Stephen Gates, who is the president and CEO of the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness, has actually just recently, in partnership with us, updated the Housing First for Youth core principles. This comes from a place where we have spent lots of time in community speaking to all of you folks over the last 7 years through our Making the Shift demonstration projects to really understand that we were making things a bit more confusing than they needed to be, with similar principles for family and natural supports, similar principles for Housing First for Youth. So I am excited to let you know you were heard, I advocated, and these are our new principles moving forward that are going to be our principles for all of our program models here out. We have added a couple. You know that I am wildly passionate about family and natural supports and all things about youth prevention. And so we really built out the social inclusion and community integration piece to make sure that we highlighted the importance of connecting to youth, to their family natural supports, chosen family, and also permanent connections. When we talk about family natural supports, we talk about who the young person and their family identify as their chosen family and their permanent connections. We by no means have rules around who sees family. Everybody sees family the different ways. And then, of course, we also wanted to add the cross-systems collaboration and accountability, because as we heard this morning, we're not going to be able to do this on our own. So it's really important for us to be working within those other systems to help them understand the work that we're doing. So, Family Natural Supports, it is a program model and it is also a philosophy. We, for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to dive deep into the Family Natural Supports framework, it's really about the relationships and the personal associations that we develop in the course of our daily living. The word natural leans into that they are informal and they are developed naturally and they're based on reciprocity. So one of the things that we talk about in our community practices and in our reflective practice that we do with our organizations is we identify that we are professional supports. And while we are very important and all of the work that we do is very important, we are professional supports, and our relationships are not reciprocal by nature. And so it's our responsibility within our jobs to be able to connect young people to who those permanent connections can be. My question is, who is their 2 a.m. phone call? If you don't know who their 2 a.m. phone call is, we have some work to do within our case management. I want to move quickly, so please find me afterwards if you want to share in my passion around these program models. But what I wanted to share with you here is this is an overview of all of our models of which we support and offer services. We want to engage as early as possible, as Tanya said, and so you'll see that Family and Natural Supports is on the left-hand side. And while we still consider Housing First for Youth an intervention in the youth space, it would be our most intrusive intervention. That's where we're making sure that young people don't enter into adult homelessness. But we really want to stay to the left-hand side as far as possible. And these fabulous folks are going to share with you how they're doing those school-based interventions, which you can see here with Reconnect. And some fabulous individuals who do shelter diversion, which is so amazing. Family and Natural Supports is our basis for all of the work that we do. So you can see that yellow line that's running through. One of my pretty bold statements that I'll share with all of you is that if you're involved in doing Housing First for Youth, or if you're involved in shelter diversion or any of those youth program models and you haven't included the Family and Natural Supports model, you're missing a large component of the work. But I'm not just saying that to say that's wrong. I'm saying that we're here to support you if you want to engage in that Family and Natural Supports approach to being able to support in that prevention style. I'm going to pass it back over to Tanya.
Thanks. We had some handouts. There was more of you than we anticipated, so sorry for you awesome people that sat in the front. But to those of you that sat in the back, congrats, I guess. We handed out both those sheets that Heidi just talked about, as well as our roadmap. So the ultimate goal of Reconnect, as I said, is to prevent a young person from experiencing homelessness in the first place. And by design, the secondary goal is youth academic success and well-being. Sorry. Where's my mouse? I just used the arrow. I need to scroll down.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, team.
Around and around on the screen.
Yeah. No, do you see it? Fair. So to dive into the features of Reconnect, the first one that we find ourselves wanting to focus on is keeping young people in place. Disconnection, risk of homelessness, and potential for sexual exploitation are outcomes of leaving one's community that can undermine a young person's well-being in both the short and long term. Reconnect is a place-based intervention that is designed to enhance a young person's assets, self-sufficiency, and connection to meeting adults, so that they can remain attached to their school and community. The second feature is advanced youth homelessness, awareness, and education. Reconnect staff are equipped to provide training and professional development on topics and frameworks that support ending youth homelessness, both for educators and students. Some of those examples from the people that we've spoken to might be on trauma-informed practice, positive relationships, what those look like for youth, social emotional learning, ACEs, Homeless 101. And then another feature is strengthening the circle of care. Young people enter into homelessness largely as a result of the challenges they experience with their parents, caregivers, and or families. The same can be said for school disengagement. With this knowledge, Reconnect operates with the underlying ethos that the family is at the core of that center of care. And we also know that one organization cannot be all things to all people. So the next component of that circle of care is strong formal relationships with partners with a clear referral pathway. And last, enhancing attachment to school and supporting success. Who here went to school? Who here was fortunate enough to have a school champion that helped you find success there? Only 2 of you? We got a lot of work to do. Yeah, there's a few, which is great. And for those of you that did not, you understand that there were moments where youth tell us time and time again, it was obvious I was struggling. Those are my teacher knew, my mentor knew, they just didn't know what to do or they didn't have capacity. Reconnect puts community in schools with the capacity to support those, again, with a referral pathway, most likely from their educators, self-referrals, or their peers. And my favorite quote is, my worker called me every day that I was not in class. They made me feel wanted, so I started showing up. It's that simple. A simple callback strategy from the Reconnect worker brought many youth back to school, and they could dive into that hard work and then support that family along the way. So I've talked enough. I will pass it over to Lee. And I have no mouse to get your presentation.
That's okay.
Well, no, we need yours here.
I got it. Oh no, we really do have.
I
a
know.
mouse.
Can you help us? Help. I need a strong champion.
Where is it?
And now would also be a good moment if anyone wants to get up and put something on our heart. That would also be lovely while we wait.
When you touch the keypad, the mouse isn't there on the screen.
Oh, we completely lost them.
There it is. Where did it go?
Here. So we're starting.
I don't need this slide. I was trying to close this one out and open up NYAWEH's.
Penny?
Nope, NYAWEH.
Oops. Oh, let me just make sure.
Okay. Sago, good morning. I was, as we had mentioned earlier, was not expecting the room to be set up like this. I would much prefer us to be sitting in circle and having a much more organic conversation, so we're gonna work with this. I'm happy to see all of your faces here today because I also didn't know what to expect. I've never done this before, so we're gonna go with it. My name is Lee Stotts. I am Mohawk Nation Wolf Clan from Six Nations of the Grand River, Haudenosaunee territory, about 6 hours away if you don't know where that is. I'm accompanied here by our amazing executive director, Monique Lavalley, and we're both from NYAWEH and Doswanteg. We're located primarily in Hamilton, south of here. I'm like northeast south. So we're going to share with you just information about how we work with our youth, but more about our organization and the way that we help address and prevent homelessness. And then I'll pass it over to Monique, who will share some more information about us. So NYAWEH and Doswanteg has been serving the Indigenous communities in Hamilton for almost 30 years. Our vision is strong cultural identity and healthy families, and our mission is to provide services and supports and safe spaces for Indigenous peoples across the lifespan that are rooted in culture and language. Our mandate is holistically support Indigenous community members on their journey wherever they are in the life cycle. In 2024, NYAWEH served over 6,400 individuals with cultural programs and services. We have a wide range of services from licensed childcare, Aboriginal Head Start programs, food bank, our NYAWEH program, which I'm going to share more information about that, youth hub, early on programs, cultural and language revitalization, and so much more. We service Brantford and Hamilton and the surrounding areas, so our catchment is fairly large. And these are just some pictures of the different kinds of programs that we offer to the community and to our childcare programs as well as specifically our youth engagement strategies also. Our NYAWEH program is Native Youth Advancement with Education Hamilton. NYAWEH began as a community-driven program, and at the time, the Aboriginal Educational Council consisted of youth, parents, and both of our school boards, so the Hamilton Wentworth Catholic District School Board and the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. NYAWEH and community partners, so all of them came together at a table to discuss how we could support Indigenous youth to stay in school, graduate. I don't know if this is going to work. There we go. Graduate and journey on to post-secondary education. This was provided through the Young family, through what we have in Hamilton is called the Hamilton Community Foundation, who wanted to make a donation to support a community-driven approach. It was from then that council developed the NYAWEH program for the vision, from the vision of the youth and the families. So it really was community-driven. It wasn't from the higher ups that developed the program. It was the community saying, this is what we need and this is how we need it. So that is in 2003, the NYAWEH program launched at Sir John A. Macdonald Secondary, and its onset of NYAWEH has grown substantially into a thriving program offered at 11 different schools across the Hamilton area. When we look at how our youth advisors are connecting with our youths in school, it's through this approach. So as we've heard, the goal, the outcome of the work that we're doing is educational success. So we see our students that are able to meet have their basic needs met, but also going on to post-secondary or in a trades field. And how we do that is by creating a sense of belonging, having a safe, caring adult, providing them opportunities to explore what their Indigenous identity may be, because as we know, that sometimes that gets lost or we may not have learned and we don't really know kind of where we belong or how we fit in. And it's through our advisors that are located within the schools that can help foster cultural identity if that's kind of lost for them, or embrace it and encourage them to kind of keep reconnecting in the ways that works for them. Also through culture and language, we provide opportunities for ceremonies, so we really embed all of our beliefs and values and traditions into what we're providing to that, which then in turns help them be successful for future. Within the school boards, we have dedicated spaces in which these programs can happen, and we don't do this alone. This is in collaboration with our community partners, with traditional knowledge keepers, and it's not about somebody telling us how we do the work. It's about us doing the work and taking that autonomy and doing that. And then so we just had our 20th anniversary of our NYAWEH program, and this is just a few pictures from our celebration that we had in November. So we rented a hall and we invited past and present students and families to come and enjoy an evening in recognition of the work that they've done and how they've made our program a success. We had Lacey Hill, who is a local Indigenous artist from Six Nations, do the performance. And then in this bottom corner here, these are all of our amazing NYAWEH advisors and their managers. So these are the individuals who are on the ground in the school connecting with our youth. And if I don't think I mentioned it, but we have advisors that are in elementary and secondary. For the focus of this, it's more secondary schools that we're looking at. But then you see in the pictures adjacent to them are some of the youth who have been engaged in the programs. And what we have seen over the years is that the relationships just keep going. So it's cyclical. We have people who were in our daycare programs who are now having their children enter our programs and who said, like, I am successful, and NYAWEH has been part of that journey because that's a safe space for us and that's created a sense of home and community. So we acknowledge the work that NYAWEH has been doing for years and just creating amazing individuals who then want to give back to their community and be part of our programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Monique.
Thank you, Lee. Is this on? Oh, got it. Okay. So I believe I introduced myself this morning already. I can't remember, but my name is Monique. My English name is Monique, and I am the Executive Director for NYAWEH Kindaswintag. I just wanted to tag on to some of the amazing work that at the 20th anniversary. Many of the students that were in NYAWEH went on to post-secondary education and came back to work for NYAWEH, and some of those youth are now our youth advisors. So it's amazing, and some of those youth also are doing their masters and thinking about PhDs, and they also came back to work at NYAWEH as language instructors and in all sorts of ways as early childhood educators. So there's this connection and the sense of belonging and community that is created within the programs. So we wanted to share a little bit of exciting news. This is brand new for us. As part of the Hamilton Community Foundation's AWH initiative, which is to promote educational success, reduce barriers to education, they have funded programs that target the students in grades 6, 7, and 8. And so in 2024, we conducted an evaluation. We engaged with Indigenous consultants. That was really important for us. And those consultants just didn't show up in the programs. They came to socials and met the students, the youth, and their families. They showed up in program. Some of them are storytellers. Some other folks are fantastic with AI and databases and computers, and they're like tech wizards. So they created relationships with the students and families before they started to ask them questions, right? So we had an anonymous online survey, QR codes. We had the youth create art, as you can see here. What does NYAWEH kind of mean to you? And then we had in-person surveys happening with those consultants in the programs, but also at our social events where families and educators and principals and administrators were attending as well. And I just wanted to note on the one drawing you can see here, the student is saying, "We are peace, we love all, we're smudging, we're offering, we're dancing," and then they have a big heart for their youth advisor. So that was what NYAWEH meant to them. So we thought that was really beautiful. These are some of the stats. So we heard from the youth, 95% of the youth in the program felt a sense of belonging, which is amazing. 88% of the youth said they felt like they were part of the community, and not just the school community, the broader community. 87% of the youth responded that they felt the program helped them to stay in school. And 90% of the youth said the program made them feel proud to be Indigenous. So some of the parent and caregiver feedback, we heard a lot from the parents, like their focus was academic success, attendance, the grades. Those things were really important for parents, and those are really important things. But also, in addition to that, 84% of the parents and caregivers reported that they saw a change in their children's behavior, right? That increased personal skills, kindness, self-esteem, a desire to learn more about Indigenous ways of knowing and being. And then some of the school administrator responses, kind of, they were the same as parents. So the educators talked about significant improvements in student self-esteem, resiliency, school attendance, and academic achievement. The educators spoke to NYAWEH as being a fun space, and it's safe, and it's the key to success. So students are able to, if they are in a classroom and it's just not working for them or struggling, they can take their work down to the NYAWEH space where they have access to medicines, where they have someone who can relate to them, and there's also not just school activities, right? So there's all sorts of other things that can happen in that space. And the program does focus on cooking, traditional skills, cultural practices that build that sense of identity, and that was what we heard from school administrators as well, is really important. And then also our youth advisors work within the school, whether they are doing an awareness day or they go into classrooms to incorporate Indigenous knowledge around math or science or the environment. So their youth advisors really are embedded into the school community to support the students that we work with. And these are our partners. Hamilton Community Foundation does fund our Abacus Elementary programs, but both the Public and Catholic School Board in Hamilton fully fund our secondary programs. We also have a grade 4-5 pilot that is in its second year right now. Miigwech.
Miigwech, thank you so much for sharing. Good morning, Oki. My name is Kate Heaney. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a human who actually is a long-term settler descendant who I was raised as a guest here in unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, and I have now been a guest on Treaty 7 territory in Calgary, Alberta, also known as Mohkinstsis, where the Elbow meets the Bow River, for 12 years. And I will also allow my lovely colleague Nicole to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, boy.
It's a hold it kind of thing.
I'm too tall. Thank you for hanging in there with us with our PowerPoint and microphone fest. It doesn't have much cord. But thank you. I am Nicole Jackson. I also use she, her pronouns, colleague of Kate's. We're both joining you today from Treaty 7 territory in Calgary. But similar to Kate, I moved to Treaty 7 about 12 years ago. I'm originally from what's known as Victoria, BC, which is unceded Coast Salish territory of the Wasanich Nation. Which, similar to Kate, really formed how I grew up and how I arrived to this work. Kate will speak a bit to the program pieces of All In for Youth, and then similar to our colleagues here, I'm going to speak more to some of the strategic and background pieces. We're going to probably rocket through this, but the slides are available on the app, as I think is probably the handout, so you're not missing much.
Thanks so much, everyone. You're right. These are short. There we go. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. I will introduce what is All In for Youth, and you're going to hear the term AFI, classic social work acronym MIDAS, but we'll reference this program a little bit more intentionally there. So this, in 2011, Alberta had a challenge on our hands, among many, was that we actually had one of the lowest high school completion rates across Canada, provincially, at around 75% of youth completing high school. And of those students who did graduate on time in Alberta, and considering that's grade 10 to 12 in Alberta, as an Ontarian, I'm always confused. But only about 40% of those youth transitioned into post-secondary. And so this initiative was a signature initiative that started with the UWCA Calgary area, and they're a partner that we work with very intentionally. They're not here with us today as they weren't able to be, but we want to speak a little bit on their behalf. And so this program, All In for Youth, was wanting to tackle the goal of improving high school completion rates in Alberta and connecting youth to supports that they needed to be successful in school and beyond. And I don't think I need to convince anybody in this room that although high school completion certainly is not the be-all and end-all of success in life, and I suspect there are many of folks who did not complete high school and have gone on to live incredible lives, we also know that the likelihood for youth who don't graduate from high school to earn less income, face unemployment and other challenges are much more real. And so they're more likely to access social assistance. And of course, as we're here at this conference, and you'll notice in a slide further, youth experiencing homelessness, almost half of them have reported in the data to have not completed high school versus 15 to 20% in the general population. So the three main pillars of the All In for Youth initiative we're focused on self-care and well-being, academic supports, and post-secondary and employment transition. So, and this is why we believe that it matters. In terms of what it actually looks like in practice, United Way is of Calgary and area is an umbrella organization that is supporting this broad collaboration across all of Calgary. So when they identified that in 2011, they recognized that this couldn't be just a program solution, but needed to be a system solution. And so when it started in 2012, there were two schools that were piloted with the All In for Youth program where success coaches were placed. And that's where Trellis comes into the conversation. And so those success coaches were connected to nonprofit organization and were in the school full time, providing support to youth with a prevention lens, and also catching folks at that kind of early intervention stage where guidance counselors, student success centers were sometimes missing those complex needs. And the initiative over those, I guess it's been 12 years now, has grown that the AFI initiative, not the success coaches, but the initiative itself, is now offered and accessible to all 37 high schools in Calgary, both the Catholic and public board, and 12 junior highs in Calgary, because we've identified that junior high is often getting youth, sometimes the earlier the better, and we recognize that. And so the program and initiative has grown beyond that. So in terms of access, all schools within the city can access the broad All In for Youth supports, and that's everything from barrier removal funds that are kind of like a slush fund within the school to support bus tickets, or helping a youth get to a job interview, or assisting youth to access mental health supports for the first time, who are not actively engaged in like a more intensive service like case management. And also there are more than 20 other nonprofit partners who offer tutoring support in the community and easy access to that. There's funding and scholarships available that folks can access through this broad AFI initiative. In terms of the Trellis contribution, we are in 15 of those 37 schools now, 14 high school and 1 junior high with a full-time success coach, as I mentioned, who works directly in that dedicated school. And so that opportunity or that connection allows us to do a lot more intensive work with youth. So if we go to the next slide, none of this will be super shocking to folks, but these are kind of those 3 pillars I mentioned. Connecting youth to positive adults, removing those barriers to success, and then supporting future planning and post-secondary transition. And so that coach really meets youth where they're at in the same creative way that so many folks do housing case management, except that they're serving at a population level. And so we support youth and provide resources to address any barriers that they might have to completing high school. And how we do that is often extremely creative. And so we've sometimes assisted students to access some kind of health care that they were unable to access otherwise. We've bridged the gap when they've been applying for low-income bus pass. We often will help youth access homelessness prevention supports, which so many of our teachers and school administrators are absolutely overwhelmed around keeping up with. The landscape's changing all the time. We also, and speaking of the family natural supports work, those success coaches are really encouraged and supported to have the flexibility to connect with parents and youth in the community and where they are, getting families connected to other resources. Trellis as an organization has 30 programs and supports across generations, and so that work gets to be done. And we also happen to have that connection to the homelessness serving sector. And so the hope is that All In for Youth, if we're intervening in that high school setting, can catch those youth before they end up into our intensive case management or in our youth shelter, et cetera, and support with family reconnection, natural supports. We can also help bridge the gap to access funding through the province around learners benefits, so that youth who've moved out of their home because it's no longer safe and are staying with a cousin are able to pay a bit of rent to that cousin while they're still attending school instead of having to pick up a second job. And so that's a huge piece. And then of course, in Calgary and across Canada, I suspect this is the reality. We do a lot of systems navigation. There's so many also newcomer youth in our communities, Indigenous youth who are new to an urban setting that are being supported and caught in that system. And we're sort of becoming a bit of a safety net in that regard. So that's a bit of what the program looks like.
I was struck too when we were listening to so many similarities with our colleagues, and this slideshow that's automatically transitioning. Similarly, we measure lots of the same stuff. So these are some of the outputs and outcomes. Kate's on the program delivery side. I'm on the sort of evaluation and impact side. And so just this past year, we had 1,000 youth receive case management across those high school locations. So it's an incredibly high volume program. We also track what's most commonly identified in terms of those barriers. Unsurprising to you all, I'm sure, mental health, transportation, financial insecurity, and food insecurity, which is where those barrier removal funds really come into play. And again, similar to our colleagues, we're measuring this sort of one or more positive connections to an adult at their school, to a non-worker, ideally non-professional support. The hope is to really grow that network of family natural supports for these young people. I imagine many of you folks in this room can remember like a TA or a coach or like somebody in your high school experience that was really rooting for you. Specifically to success coaches, 90% of them said that the success coach gave them the opportunity to address some challenge that was stopping them from being involved in school. And we also are collecting words from youth, similar again to our colleagues, just really wanting to hear from those young people about how the availability of the success coaches was impacting their school experience. Lots of common themes here around this experience of distress, feeling alone, feeling anxious about being in the classroom, and sort of needing a champion to really root for them, to problem solve, and to be hands-on in their learning journey. Again, also similar to our colleagues, this intervention is backed by a pretty important set of partners. So the Calgary Board of Education, and previously also the Catholic School Board, UWCA of Calgary and area, and then Trellis as sort of the operationalization of success coaches. I think in reflecting and preparing for this presentation, it was really the opinion of all three stakeholders that without one of the legs of the proverbial three-legged stool for All In for Youth, this program doesn't have the efficacy or the longevity that it's ended up having. To give you a sense of the timeline, AFI is 12-ish years old. Again, with our colleagues, was thinking about sort of this this story. We live in nonprofit where things are funded as pilots or as innovations. And so having this long-term intervention, this sort of knowledge about the program throughout the city has been really helpful. Back in 2011, there was sort of this synergy happening between UWCA and Alberta Education, a design table in the early 2012s, and then a launch. You'll see, though, the program has really evolved. We've looked at junior highs. There's been a program looking at supports for after high school graduation, and now all the way up to present, AFI is in a total of 37 high schools and 12 junior highs. We're still working on the elementary thing, but I think it's coming, hopefully. What I also wanted to draw your attention to is that there was some key things that made AFI possible. I'm sure the politics of this is not lost on folks in the room. There was this shared understanding and focus on the problem. High school graduation seems to be a very agreeable goal, right? We all know that it's foundational to way bigger social goals like preventing youth homelessness, managing youth mental health, these kinds of things. But there's something that was singular and focused about high school graduation, even if we all in the background knew this was like a way bigger situation. That problem was also measurable and being measured at the time the program was launched. And there was some alignment of readiness and interest for all three parties. UWCA also had a pretty significant community credibility in terms of being able to back and really champion the All In for Youth initiative. And then sort of this collective fail forward mentality and the ongoing co-creation of the initiative. The young person pictured here was the valedictorian of her school this year and also supported by a success coach. And the collective impact, again, another sector familiar phrase. This gives you a bit of the sense of growth. I mentioned the adding in new schools and how that has grown. And again, there's real dollars and meaningful buy-in that's behind those numbers. But perhaps more importantly, again, to this point about measurability, we all know correlation does not equal causation, so we won't pat ourselves on the back too much, but the 2012 number for Alberta students was 75%. This past school year, it was 86% for Calgary students. Based on all that we know about linkages between high school graduation and other lifelong challenges, we are considering that a triumph. And this is what some of our partnering looks like. We're at fairs and conventions. There was a version of this presentation where I was a United Way staff member and Kate was from Trellis. We really are in this together. In the past 2 years, we've been exploring making an MOU because it turns out making decisions with those three huge bodies is a pretty complicated endeavor. We also needed to explore things like data storage, what information sharing regulations were in place, the junior high investments piece, and just the change management that comes from three big organizations with teachers changing, staff changing, our pals at United Way changing. There was a colleague whose name is Craig at United Way who actually played a critical role there for a while, but was previously a principal in CBE. And he moved to the United Way of Calgary and area and championed AFI from within. But with this principal's perspective, that really was interesting in how it informed and helped us move AFI forward. So that's a bit of what the collaboration and partnership piece looks like. I think that's the end. Our contact information's in the thing. Let's have some questions.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Oh, also help us make it look less sad.
We're going to move into our little, what we're calling, because we're in Ottawa, the conversation period instead of the question period. No? Oh. How do I get this? Oh, slideshow. Right. There we go. Simple. We're going to call it real conversation. Again, we've talked a lot at you. As you can see, there's a lot of repetition between us, so we tried not to say the same things over and over. And we talked as a group about what we get asked about the most regarding these cross-system collaborations. And here's what we came up with. So if there's one of these topics that really sticks out to you more than the other, we're happy to begin there, or we can just go through and start with funding and sustainability. Does anyone have a desire for anything different than starting there? No? Perfect. So I think Nicole just touched on this a little bit, and it's really important. And as we've toured around as Away Home Canada, everyone has a different funding model to do this work. As Monique said, some of hers is fully funded from their school boards. Obviously, there's a lot of fundraising that goes into this. I guess, is there anything that you would like to share regarding your funding? And you both have longevity in these programs, so I'm sure things have changed over the years.
Okay. I can stand too. Okay, it's going. I know my voice doesn't carry. I think what I wanted to share around funding and sustainability is that this has been a journey for NYAWEH with our relationships with both of the school boards. And the project did start out by a donation from a family in the community through the Hamilton Community Foundation. And it was funded for many, many years through the Community Foundation. And we found, some allies within the school system when we started at Sir Donnie MacDonald and then expanded to Parkview. It was really building relationships with school administration, principals, and educators to have those voices speak to the impact that the project was having. And then when they couldn't deny that students were coming to school and graduating and increasing course, their kind of their targets, credits and graduation, they knew that they needed to fund this project. And so that is when we started a partnership agreement between both school boards and NYAWEH and Swinteg. So it did take a lot of work. It's a journey, and it has changed over the years.
Yeah, I think. Check, check. Check, check, check. Similarly, the role of United Way in our context, again, many of you will be familiar with 1, 2, and 3 year contracts, which we still, of course, are navigating, but this is one of the situations with continuous funding that it's sort of been really a fundamental assumption for our organization that All In for Youth really carries on. It also was importantly backed by not only United Way, but an additional, again, family-based philanthropic donor that provides specifically a living allowance for grade 12s in some specific circumstances. And so the affiliation between AFI and that third-party donor has been really important. And then last, I think by leveraging existing nonprofits, Trellis in our case, there was lots of in-kind stuff, right? We have all kinds of nonprofit infrastructure, which means that when it comes to service delivery and training and all that different stuff that's required to have healthy staff in schools. Schools also donating office space. That's a requirement for all of our success coaches. Those in-kind pieces also were important for kind of program operations.
Anyone have a question regarding? Yeah.
Hello. I was wondering with what kind of conditions these funding come, like is it long-term? Do you have like some reports each 6 months, stuff like that?
We've got all the usual stuff that you would expect. So annual reporting, again, lots of collaborative. You know, we had I think a 10-year anniversary party, and there's a summit every year. So in a lot of ways, it does follow a traditional program funding model in that sense, although I would say there is a fair amount of latitude, particularly when it comes to the barrier removal funds. We have used that money to buy like a prosthetic limb for a young person at one point that couldn't be funded for whatever reason, because we also work with folks who are struggling with system navigation in the newcomer space or in the child intervention space. Having cash in hand that we can kind of spend without really many restrictions has been an important part of that funding for us.
I think in terms of for NYAWEH program, we have great autonomy. These both school boards have allowed us to determine the trajectory of the program, and we don't have great reporting requirements. We have a partnership agreement and a contract, and we do evaluations such as you see there, but other than the number of students that are in the program, we're given autonomy to offer those programs in a good way and to spend our time working with the youth rather than with administrative burden.
Hi there. Just wondering, do you guys follow the traditional school calendar year? Do you do supports over the summer at all, or what does that look like?
Great question. Yeah, for the All In for Youth program, we operate year round. And so we have kind of an opportunity through that where we provide support through the summer and through breaks for youth, especially those youth who are in kind of the most tricky circumstances. And that also sometimes creates challenges because some of our staff need to take a vacation in the middle of November. But it's actually a really nice, I would segue that also into acknowledging that there's a really great opportunity for us to both partner and collaborate within the CBE while still having a bit of arm's length and creativity in how we address some of those issues so that we're really connecting with them, but also have the freedom and flexibility to adapt and get creative. And of course, the management piece, as any caseworkers in the room will know, is not turning yourself into a taxi service, for example, but even that ability to meet youth in the community in the summer, et cetera, has been a really great, a great feature of how we operate. Yeah, thank you.
For our NYAWEH program, we do follow the school calendar. However, we have opportunities where we can host like summer camps where the even high school kids are interested in attending those. But we also, for higher risk youth as well, the manager also supports them over the summer and does regular check-ins with them just to make sure they stay connected. And I think the other piece to that is it's not just about what we're doing in the schools, but how do we build support systems around the youth so that way when we're not there, somebody else is then a support and we don't become the end-all be-all, because that's not how we do things. So.
And I think all the sites that we went to did a really good job of bridging between the education system and themselves as community partners. So they work really close with the academic counselors or those guidance teams. So when they can't be there, the school becomes a safe place again, and they have more than one champion within that building, which is really phenomenal to see. And all the educators, as Monique said, they trust these people, right? They've built this relationship. They know that they're the experts, and they're focused on education and academics, and they're focused on community supports.
Hi. So I'm in Ontario, and unfortunately, I've noticed that some of our high schools are closing. I don't know what's happening in Calgary. I saw from your diagram lots of high schools. But what's your plan and your sustainability plan to keep the kids still in school? Are your high schools closing? And do you have a model that will continue the AFE going forward in those scenarios?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think that's part of the MOU. There was a time when we more casually, perhaps, made decisions about which schools success coaches were and weren't going to be in. It's a matter, of course, that AFE supports broadly, so referrals to the partner programs, some access to funds is available in all schools, sort of regardless, but having a human in the school has become a sort of a three-way decision. And so as we, if you've ever been to Calgary, you know it's quite a sprawling city. So as there are new schools emerging in some of those quite large, quite dense communities, there is this conversation about which schools we can and should be in. I think there is tension, though. There's a situation this past year where we have a coach who's shared between two new schools to sort of see where there's traction, because frankly, depending on the school's administration, the educators, and a whole range of other factors, sometimes there isn't as much traction as we'd like. So there is some politicking in the mix there. Fair to say?
Yep. And I would say too, and I guess the Alberta context, never something I thought I'd say in my hometown. The Alberta context that we have is that our schools are actually bursting at the seams, or at least the Calgary context. And so I apologize because we don't have as much in terms of that experience. I mean, some of our inner city schools, there's some shifts, but what it's actually looked like and the creative challenges we're facing is youth living in the deep south of Calgary having to transport themselves to downtown because that's the only school that has availability to serve those youth. It's on the provincial government's radar that schools in the city, and I believe in Edmonton as well, are in that capacity challenge. So that's actually, I apologize because it's not related to that challenge, but that's the piece that we're facing right now.
I have a question.
Move on to collaborations and relationships. Oh, sorry.
I have a question for the funding sustainability, probably two-part. What are the practices of the TRC calls to actions that you're using in requesting for funding sustainability reporting practices? And then secondly, what are the policies and the bylaws that you're reaching right into the school administrative systems to ensure your programs and such are staying within?
Well, our project started prior to the TRC, right? So I think we're in a space now where most communities and most school boards understand the importance of Indigenous education and embedding that in a really rich way, and the importance of relationships. So for us, there hasn't been, I should say, there was in the past, there hasn't been a reason for us to leverage those things because they're already occurring and our partnership is very strong. And so oftentimes they'll come to the school boards will come to us and ask us if we want to expand something, or if, you know, we need additional funds to run the program. And there's some core set of things that are required in each of the rooms, right, to have the space and ability to cook food and furniture and all those kinds of things. So, like, knock on wood, luckily for us, we haven't had to do those things. So we feel very grateful for that.
Thank you. And as the non-Indigenous led program, I think I can only speak, I think, on behalf of Trellis as an organization, even though I know we're somewhat representing United Way. I think very intentionally, and we know as well in terms of serving Indigenous youth within our community, that also the rates of sort of high school attendance and completion are lower because we're really operating from a Western framework in that system. Within the CBE, there are a number of initiatives that have, Calgary Board of Education, there are a number of initiatives that have brought forward more intentional connection to Indigenous culture and community within the school setting, but that is very much school by school, and unfortunately is governed realistically by a bit of resource scarcity, I suspect. As an initiative ourselves and within Trellis, we're a non-Indigenous organization, but with a number of knowledge keepers and circle keepers that guide our practice. And one of the pieces that we've just brought forward in the last year, for context, I also just took over as the program manager in the last 6 months, but we brought forward that disparity piece and sort of how can we move forward into the future to work more collaboratively and intentionally with CBE and the United Way around embedding some of those practices in our work. But I'll be completely open in acknowledging that I think that it has been not front and center enough in some of the work historically with AFI, partly because the United Way of Calgary has had sort of a different pillar of services around reconciliation and work, and that is actually a challenge for us moving into the future. So thank you for your question. I think it's really important to question that in how we're operating.
Yeah, I'd say we see these slivers. So one of them that comes to mind is that United Way has had a provision for some of their programs to do reporting in a different way, to have accountability look different. So instead of, or regrettably at this point, in addition to a formal written report, again, trying to walk it in parallel. We've been able to sort of debrief the program year in circle with our staff, our young people, and some of the other partners. I'd say we are working on expanding that methodology because it's been very positive, and obviously aligns with, again, our organization's commitment to walk in both ways. But I think the learning curve there has been steep, if we're honest.
Collaborations and partnerships. We all talked a little bit about,
No, actually, it was around collaborations and relationships.
Kick us off.
So first, I want to say thank you for opening up with the heart work topic. We opened up our session with that, and the beginning of this session, we talked about heart work. So one of our principles at our organization, Covenant House Toronto, is sanctuary. And when you unpack sanctuary, one of the words is love. The reason I bring that up is because on the one hand, we do have our frameworks and methodologies, i.e. Housing First for Youth, etc. So I would like to ask the panel, could you talk through your reflexivity process when dealing with a word like love? Although we can get very clinical in our work, how are you reflecting on a word like love as it relates to engaging program participants, in particular youth and vulnerable populations?
So I can share with you, one of our elders, Grandma Renee Thomas Hill, always shares with us that our first language is love. And it's one of, there's Golonkwa and Mohawk and Anishinaabe-Moan. That's one of our 7 grandfathers teaching, but it's not as very linear as just love, right? Love resounds further. It's about, we think also about like the Thanksgiving address, which is Haudenosaunee, and I'm not Haudenosaunee, I'm Anishinaabe. However, it's that honoring and sending our love out to all of creation and everything within creation, the waters, which we spoke about this morning, the trees, the people, our ancestors, the land. So love, from an Indigenous perspective, is not just love between people, but it's love between the natural world and our relationship and our space within that. So in our programs, love is kind of, you saw in that photo or the drawing, what one of the students said, this is NYAWEH is love, which is they feel connected in a way with all their culture, their language, their ceremony with the land, and also to their advisors and their school community. And so when you think about it in the context from the Indigenous perspective, it's about our relationship to everything in the universe. And that kind of, one of our other elders, Frank Miller, talks about universal energy, right? Like we are all energy. So it's our experience that we have, that energetic exchange, not just between human beings, but between all things, that really is kind of our centering piece, and that is love. I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So how I come to this question, I have very little youth-facing work in my own role, do lots of evaluation stuff. And so part of my job is reading youth's comments, reading what youth have to say about their workers. And another part of my job is this ongoing conversation about, in the Western way, we would use a phrase like program design. And our staff, I would say, really exist in the space between, on the one hand, being a regulated profession, right? In many cases, something like a social worker, codes of conduct, right? This is all familiar to you folks. And then on the other hand, being an agency that's deeply committed to work around anti-racism, decolonizing practice, indigenization of our work. And so we are walking in this kind of liminal space where we want our staff to be able to use words like love, and we have an HR department that might feel a bit uncomfortable with that idea. And yet we do hear from youth in their own words about the experience of love and safety and belonging from the staff that they work with. The verbiage that they use implies this real intimacy, I think, of having somebody see you as a teenager in this really unique way. And so, yeah, I think we do live in that tension, trying to recognize, again, these legacies of professionalization of the work and the distance that kind of creates, while also trying to work differently, meaningfully, especially when we're in communities where the high schools, right, we want to position coaches who look like the students in the schools that they're in, right, who have language skills that are relevant to that community, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Good question. And I think just from the educators that I spoke with, there's also this, they may be in an educational setting, but they're working from a different policies and procedures. So as Nicole said, sometimes they walk that different line, and educators look to them to do that because they feel their hands are tied at moments of love or moments of compassion, or if it's not about this homework right now, I don't have capacity, and they're fortunate enough to have people in their schools that operate from community PP.
Can I add one other thing? Because it was just such a beautiful question, and I want to see your lovely face. The other piece that connects back, I think, to what we talked about with family and natural supports is we can say family and natural supports. That's just about a community of humans that give a crap about you and want to continue to do so. And I think it's so important as well for us to like balance that humanness in a school community, recognizing that, we are constantly walking that line around being professionals and being part of a community and being connected and in relationship with folks. That's just all of those pieces. And additionally, I think what I would add as a manager in terms of coaching staff teams is, and they coach me back, it's all reciprocal, is recognizing that when we're facing challenges, I'm thinking of a great example of working with youth in our schools who are gender creative and trying to figure out who they are, and they're living in a family where that culturally just doesn't align for whatever reason, and trying our absolute hardest to recenter on that love and connection and relationship that is actually really important, rather than dismissing it or walking away from it or turning it into a binary of like unsupportive or supportive, and being there to hold space for that that kind of like flow through. That makes sense.
Yes. Sure.
Do you guys experience stigma and being connected to like housing supports in mainstream school systems?
Do we experience stigma in it, like in terms of connecting youth who are in school to housing supports? Are you thinking? I'm thinking.
What's interesting about All In for Youth is that it's like a co-branded situation, which is interesting because so Trellis is a result of a merger that took place several years ago between the Boys and Girls Clubs of Calgary and Aspen
Family and Community Network.
Yeah, it's fine. Nonprofit. And so because we're known in schools as AFI, right, All In for Youth, I think sometimes people don't make the jump to like, Trellis operates the only youth homelessness shelter in Calgary. But the students and the teachers in school know us as the AFI folks. And so in some ways, I think that distance works to our advantage because there isn't this like pathologizing of like, oh, you're involved or you're a client of Trellis. So I would say, if anything, we experience like the positives of that integration, that we can just be like, oh, I'm going to introduce you to your housing caseworker, or you've been staying at shelter. Zach and I can have a conference about your right and work together to help you. I think it's been the opposite for us.
And it's not that they don't experience that stigma in schools, but yeah, like that youth could be just as likely to be coming in to talk to their worker about how they had to stay at a shelter last night, or to get some ramen because they're hungry.
I would say it's the same for us. We have relationships with Indigenous service providers, and so it's about those relationships and linking the youth and their family to those folks who are like their community. Well, they are their community, right? So they are their community. They're their aunties, their uncles. So it's seen in a little bit of a different way in terms of like the Indigenous perspective, as opposed to, I think if they were going to another housing support, that might be seen in a different way. But I think that the pathways that we've created have created a space that is safe and respectful, and the relationships with the service providers as well. We don't offer housing, but we have relationships with the service providers that do.
Yeah. Oh. She's had her hand up for quite a while, and I know you can handle it.
Thank you so much for all your presentations. I'm really curious about the success coaches. Like, what's their educational background, and then what training do they get, and then what's their caseload?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, equivalency-based or educational background, we're pretty flexible. So some of them will have like that more standard social work or child and youth care background. But we also have some success coaches with lived experience who come from various, like I think we even have some folks that are pursuing their diploma but have a ton of lived or practiced experience in the past. So we're able to be quite flexible around that. As long as we hit accreditation standards over some time. I would say we tend to skew hiring younger staff, not entirely. It does happen, and some of that is I think what's interested, like what folks are interested in doing in their career at that point in time, but also it's an opportunity for sort of that not full-blown peer relationship, a little bit of closer to that relationship piece. And I'm sorry, what was the other? Oh, training. Yeah, that's really interesting. So we don't have a set caseload necessarily. We commit to serving at least 30 youth more intensively in a caseload type capacity over the course of the year. And then usually per school, we're seeing between 50 and 200 other youth in a one-off capacity where we don't do a full intake, but we might be supporting that youth to do systems navigation, et cetera, so that we can offer kind of a wide range of supports. And so at any given time, most of our AFI, All In for Youth coaches are serving between 15 and 20, 25 youth of mixed complexity needs. Yeah.
And then agency-wide, so some standard stuff that will feel familiar. So intergenerational trauma, right, LGBT and gender diverse trainings, trauma-informed crisis intervention, all the usual stuff you'd think of.
I'll just add in terms of like practical training. What we're looking for when we have someone step into a success coach role is that ability to do that connection and youth work, but they're also in this funky zone of really doing like cross-professional work too, because they're not super, there's no hierarchy in terms of you report to the principal. There is a little bit of one within AFI, but our hope too is that they can approach that from a partner level. And so we're really supporting that. We're looking for folks who we can build that confidence and comfort in. But yeah, we have folks of all ranges of experiences in our team.
And as mentioned, we just developed that Foundations 101 based off all the research and what we've heard from our partners, that starting out in these roles, these are the competencies that people are looking for. So Heidi and I can for sure share more about that with anyone that's looking for that, because we just, again, would like your organization to all kick off at that same starting point based off of what you've said those needs are. Our model says if you're going to do intensive F&S work, 10 is plenty for a caseload, which I know is shocking because the funding usually doesn't support that. But a lot of these folks do outreach and then they'll do that one-time support, like they said, the transit cards, the food. So they're in there, but they're not per se on their caseload because the kids know they're there. They'll come in, they'll rotate through and they'll move between based on the relationship, whether they're ready for that intensive work or they just need some support right now to continue to come to the building. Sorry.
No worries. Is this on?
No, but we can yell.
We're just beginning to work here locally around intentionally setting up upstream and reconnect. And one of the first hurdles, which should be easy, but it's not, that we're encountering with our school boards is around information sharing and the protection of these are our students, these are our clients.
Yeah.
We're going to know a lot more about a student than a teacher should. I'm wondering how you've navigated that, both in Calgary and in Hamilton, from maybe a bit more of like a secular versus culturally appropriate service provision model. Like what are you sharing in what ways? Why?
Yeah, so we should chat after, but the short answer is, from a practical day-to-day perspective, we maintain our content and information in a completely separate database. Nary the two shall meet. We are regulated differently, of course, than how the school board manages their information. We have also had some very challenging discussions and boundary setting, maybe we'll call it, about, again, with the Catholic School Board, for instance, as a nonprofit, we manage reportable incidents, right? When a young person has an abortion, right? Like there's all of these very real cases where the division of church and state, of Trellis and the school board is actually positions our success coaches really importantly to be able to provide care that might not actually be available through the school. And that escalated and became a whole thing, as you can imagine. But I would say in some ways that separation we're not co-case managing with the school in a really ongoing way, but we have regular meetings, right, between our staff and their staff, and there is a lot of informal, I think, work happening together to understand what's happening inside and outside the classroom. So I think it is that informal piece, whereas the written content and the sort of legal dimensions remain sort of separate.
I would say it's very similar for us. We have autonomy, so there's, Indigenous data sovereignty and all those kinds of things, but we work really close. We have close relationships within each of those schools, and it's about creating those relationships, not just at the higher level. Like that, there's always buy-in, right, at school administration, at boards of education. Where it needs to trickle down, well, usually where it needs to trickle down is to the school level, right, and to get those folks on board as well. But we work really well with social work teams and resource teachers and whatever it is the need of the student, whether it's health and wellness and things like that. But we really have our own set of policies and procedures that our advisors follow, and then there's that separation between school and the services NYAWEH provide.
I don't think you can spend enough time on the change management and the implementation before you kick off, and maybe they'd tell me, but they all have formal agreements or MOU, right? And they've really written that out. I mean, it doesn't always work in practice, but like Monique said, if you get in that instance at the school level, you know what your goals are and you don't end up with that mission drift, because that happens really fast because educators are strapped and they're like, can you do this for me? Or if I give you this date, or can we do the case consult together? And it's really about boundaries and what's best for that student, because they don't need their teachers to know everything that's happening for them. But I get that teachers think they need to know that information, so you see that struggle all the time. And I don't even know if it's a struggle. It's probably really healthy, actually, but yeah. And I think we have 3 minutes. So is there any, we didn't get through half of these. Getting started, we got that one. And I think the other key thing is they have key champions. So there is someone in that school that understands their organization, understands the benefit of having them there. So when they come up against those roadblocks, that champion at that school is like, no, like these are important. NYAWEH has classrooms, like full classrooms. It's just gorgeous. If you can get out there and see their space or anything, I'd highly recommend it. It's phenomenal to see in action. Yeah. Any final, one more question?
Okay, I think my voice is loud enough. My question is dealing with, sorry, my name is Debo. I work with MMF. Okay, so my question is dealing with organization or partnering with organization. How does your organization deal with when other partners or programs come connect with you for the youth and they give you this mindset of we will continue working like a hands-on and be like we would still be supporting the youth, but eventually it's like you're just dropping off the youth, and for the youth it feels like okay, I'm being passed on. For the worker, the new staff, it's more like I need to do the intake, the whole thing again. And I've realized it's stress on the youth more, and there's always a disconnection because it's now time for you to rebuild that relationship, which can take longest time. So how do you deal with the organization or my question basically is how do you deal with organizations leaving participants, but at the start saying they are going to still support you?
Yeah, I think Kate commented earlier on how a lot of the work we do with staff is to get them to be great at youth work, and the rest of the work we do with staff is to be great at engaging with other professionals, right? And so it's there's sort of that peer-to-peer piece around, can we do some warm transfer? Can we get clear on who's doing what? Can we be colleagues sort of in this work with this young person? Right, we have ROIs, what does that stand for? Releases of information for a reason, right? So that we're able to not force that youth to tell their story again. But it's complex. I wouldn't say we're nailing it.
This is not the point of this session, but it is actually what you identified as part of why the organization that we happen to work for, Trellis, exists, because we recognize that being able to help youth have transitions between services that felt more smooth and supportive was valuable. We also want a partner, it's both and, but I think that's been a bit of an effort that we've made. In a school context, what I would say is that it's that communication, collaboration in a place, which is not always possible when you're doing scattered site casework, we know, but that relationship being like, this is your person, this is your AFI coach, I'm not looking at, you have 400 youth on your caseload or who you're serving as a guidance counselor. I'm here to help you and connect and keep those conversations going. That's all I would add. Same.
Yeah, and I know we're at time, so thank you. And I know we had technical difficulties, so let's chalk it up to the first session on the first day. So thank you, and I know so reach out to us. I wish you a wonderful conference and. Oh yeah, and if you enjoyed this mashup and the talk about youth, MTS is hosting conference in Toronto in February, which is solely youth based. So reach out to us and we can share that, or it'll be at the COH table.
And before you leave, feel free.
And the heart. Don't leave without placing some of your love on our heart, please, because it'll stay here for the next 3 days. My heart.